All right, everybody, here we go. Chop a dong back at you. We're going to do fantasy points per dollar and a little bit of ownership in the domination station this week for week 14 NFL Rundown. Once again, thanks for always liking the videos, telling me that they're helping. That's what keeps us rolling. That's what keeps us producing the types of content that makes you guys better players because we need the feedback, and getting that positive feedback helps direct us in, I guess, the way that's going to help you guys the most. So, once again, thank you. Let's dive in. We're going to skip the research station. You've already seen that. We've gone through home, favorite, implied team odds, all that sort of stuff for all of the positions and looked at what some of those key spots might be to start off this week. But let's dive in now and start talking a little bit more about cash games, because cash games, the concept is very, very simple. You're wanting value. You're wanting to outproduce your salary. So you need to find those players that are on sale. Like I tell you all the time, go into the grocery store with $200 this week. And if you come out with more than $200 worth of groceries, you did good. That's the idea. Now, if you come out with 300 or 400 or 500, you're smashing the week. You did great. That's the idea of what we're trying to do with cash games. Value, value, value. Where do we find it? We go into the domination station optimizer and we scroll down to fantasy points per dollar and we sort by that column. That is what is going to bring the big bargains to the top. Now, if you've noticed, I've unchecked all of the columns here first, and I'm going to be using a combination of fantasy points per dollar and ownership. These are the two columns that I'm concerned about for this particular video. This is what's going to help us. This is the bargain. The public sees it or the public doesn't see it. In cash games, I don't care so much about fading the chalk. I don't mind eating it, because in that chalk is safety. If 50% of the people had that same guy, if he has a good game or a bad game, I'm okay. It didn't jeopardize my chances of hitting the money line. I don't need the leverage to, ooh, he's 60% owned. I'm going to fade him. And then I'll have a better chance at for what? For $2? Save that for when you could turn a dollar into $100 or $1,000. That's when you pull out that move. Not for cash games. For cash games, you keep it a little closer to the vest. There are times when you will make some key pivots. So I don't want to make it sound like that's always a no-no. I just want you to understand that by and large, we're not worried about that ownership. We're not worried about getting fancy. We're not worried. Again, it goes back to the fundamentals. We're not trying to do the twist around, double back, flipping, slam dunk. We're just going to go up, drop it in with two hands and be done, because we don't want to clank the damn thing off the rim. Okay? That's embarrassing in cash games. You don't want to do that. So if I started off with the quarterbacks, and look just fantasy points per dollar. Patty Mahomes is up there at the top. Is he typically a cash game type quarterback? Yes. Is he home? Is he favored? Is he implied to score a bunch of points this week? Yes, he's a cash game consideration. It's that simple. It's going to be a little chalky this week, but not too bad. Quarterback is always pretty spread out. Very seldom is there just some chalk quarterback that you have to own in cash games. It just doesn't exist. Because generally speaking, they all run in the same tight channel of 20 to 30 points. Some have bad weeks, some have good weeks, but generally speaking, it doesn't matter if you pay $9,000 for a quarterback or $6,000 for a quarterback, you're going to get around 20 points. That's just kind of the way that works. And they're all projected soft this week for some reason. Taysom Hill, high quarterback, high projection per point, a big favorite over Philly again. Philly has a low implied team total. New Orleans has a high one. He's not all that chalky, but yes, he's a cash game consideration. Tom Brady's at home. He's favored. He's implied to score points. Another cash game consideration. Kyler Murray, I don't know about you, but I'm not trusting that shoulder just yet. New York's a decent defense. They haven't been running with Kyler Murray as much lately. The floor's been a little bit hurt by that, so I'm going to lay off a bit. Tua, no. Bridgewater, Trubisky, Deshaun Watson. Now I'm starting to get down here a little bit lower on this list, where there's a lot of guys with a better price salary point than the guys that we're using. So it looks like, Aaron Rodgers is pretty safe every week, and he's going to be a little bit chalky, but you could consider him. Justin Herbert, you could consider. But now you're starting to get a little bit lower down here on this list. It's a little bit dicey. I think Justin Herbert is in a good bounce back spot. It's a great tournament play. I think it's a solid cash game option too. But when you're looking at Taysom Hill at 7,700, Tom Brady at 7,800 versus 8,300, I think you might want to save that money a little bit. So you got 4 or 5 picks that you're looking at. but seem like they're in pretty good spots. These are, generally going to be on Geek's list, on Keg's list, whatever. There may be a couple of guys here that I left off that they put on there. There may be a couple of guys I have on here that they don't like. That's the nature of the beast, but we're going to have a lot of overlap. When I go to running back and do the same thing, oh, McKissick, is Anthony Gibson hurt? I don't know the answer to that. But for right now, I'm looking at a high point per dollar. I'm looking at low ownership right now. You're going to find more concentrated chalk at running back than you will at quarterback. And so the big guys are who I'm kind of looking at. 23% Derrick Henry, obvious spot for Derrick Henry this week. It's expensive, though. It's very, very expensive. But Jacksonville's very, very bad, and he dudded last week. It's still an obvious spot. Eckler is another obvious spot. Pass catching backs against Atlanta. Down here, 15% McCaffrey. If the Q tag comes off him, absolutely. I like Chris Carson if the Q tag comes off of him. Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and check him. Let's hope he plays. I'm not going to say he's going to. I don't like Aaron Jones in a committee, even though this is a great spot for him. He's going to be highly owned. If he goes off, it's going to suck. But generally speaking, in that committee, it adds a little bit of risk. I look back up here. David Montgomery, shiny new toy again. I know Houston sucks. I just don't like David Montgomery. I may have to take him this week if his ownership projection keeps going up. So I'll check him temporarily for now. Myles Gaskin getting the workload. Although this is going to be a negative game script for them, I don't know that I need to go there to save that money. David Montgomery probably does that for me. James Robinson's always a decent play. He's up there, fantasy points per dollar. He's a little pricey. He's owned. He's going to be heavily owned, even with the Q tag. So, you've got yourself a few guys that you're looking at that are in decent spots. Aaron Jones is going to be the death of me this week, isn't he? But that's it. After that, these guys are all just low-owned flyers that you just don't need to really worry about. Your pool is going to come. Two of your running backs are likely going to come right out of here. When you go over to wide receivers, Robbie Anderson gets a lot of targets, but hasn't been. I would check him. God, I would check him in the. I guess with Curtis Samuel being out, I would check Robbie Anderson in the research lab, though. Honestly, I know he's chalky. I do not like chalky wide receivers typically. Devontae Adams is just too good to pass up. Allen Robinson, these guys are all wearing the Q, aren't they? Tyreek Hill is a decent cash play, but he's expensive. Terry McLaurin's usually a decent cash play. Adam Thielen can be okay. That's a good run back in a tournament, honestly. Brandon Cooks again with the Q. Corey Davis, usually pretty solid. If he's healthy, he's been getting the love, and he's going to be a little bit lower owned. Again, I'm not targeting lower owned wide receivers on purpose. I love getting them. I love landing on them. When I see a very, very chalky wide receiver, I love to fade him. I can't fade Devontae Adams. I'm not saying I'm jamming him into my lineup at that price. I'm saying I'm going to make him eligible for the domination station. Let's go ahead. We'll see how much domination station loves Robbie Anderson. Come down here a little bit more. Galladay's out. Marvin Jones has been interesting. He's not probably a cash safe play. Ridley usually is. Aguilar is a little bit tough. Charcuterie, Metcalf. I would take him over Lockett at this point, but it could end up being a Lockett week. High throwing game. Keenan Allen. It's a little bit pricey for the situation. Tim Patrick, A.J. Brown, T.Y. Hilton, C.D. Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. Antonio Brown is interesting. It's considered. He can be considered. Jameson Crowder certainly considered. Brandon Ayuk's been interesting. Man, but that's a tough matchup. Again, low ownership, low fantasy points per dollar, wherever there our column went here. So just not to get too goofy, you just don't want to end up on a lot of these guys. I don't want to see these guys down in here in my lineups. I don't mind. I'm going to have to take some value. Antonio Brown, Jameson Crowder, Ayuk, probably okay. Travis Kelce has to be checked. Darren Waller has to be checked. Hawkinson has to be checked. Ingram, you can take it or leave it. Gesicki's interesting. They should be throwing against Kansas City. Don't know that I want to see him in my lineup. Not at the expense of these guys here. I don't like paying up for this at all. If I check Logan Thomas, he probably ends up in a lot of my lineups. Gronkowski's a little bit interesting. But I think I'll play this one a little bit safer and just, these guys, a couple of these guys will pop into the cheat sheets. There's no doubt. You're going to need some value at this spot. You'll probably wind up on Hawkinson in a lot of it, which is fine. Hawkinson's got a pretty hard floor of 10 points. Who'd we say? New Orleans and Seattle. There's New Orleans. There's Seattle. Now, who your your lowest priced viable defense is, I'm not concerned with that just yet. It could be just about anybody. I just want to see if I can make it work with a bunch of picks that I like, with a bunch of high floor plays I like. Defense is so volatile. It's so weird saying high floor with them. But being that that is kind of what we've ended up on, wide receivers, sorry, I'm going to put that at about 10%. No tight ends. I'm going to not put any randomness in this at all. No stacking, no nothing. We're going to run about 10 lineups. One unique player, leave it in optimal mode, and just crank a lineup out. See if it'll do it. Only one team. Interesting. Taysom Hill, David Montgomery, Chris Carson, Jameson Crowder, Antonio Brown, Robbie Anderson. That's not the best lineup in the world, but it's not too terrible. For me to end up using more players, I would probably need a cheaper defense. So if I come in here and I look at the defenses, Kansas City we said might be viable. Let's look for somebody who's a little bit more turnover prone. Tennessee would be interesting with Derrick Henry. New York with Kyler Murray. But this is just random crapshooty type stuff. Really, Carolina with Denver throwing as much as they, although it's Drew Lock. It's not super bad. Not really seeing a lot else to really go after. Maybe the Houston Texans. So let's see if that doesn't change things up a little bit. And there, we've got our 10 lineups. So the one we're jerking around with is the defense, right? We've got Hawkinson only, which we predicted. McLaurin, Anderson, Davis, Brown, Ayuk, Crowder, none of the bigs, which is fine because it's a lot to pay for a low floor. Devontae Adams might be the only one that I would accept. Montgomery, Eckler, Robinson, Carson. No Derrick Henry surprises me a little bit. And then some Taysom Hill and some Tom Brady. So that's generally where our cash games are going to wind up on a lot of those players. Not all of them, but a lot of those players. If I sort by percent owned, I want the chalk up to the top, and that's not too chalky. We're going to see some things change as the week goes on. But right now, these are the names you should be paying attention to. These are the names that you should be watching. These are not necessarily the names you should be falling in love with, because you're going to be using some of the coaches' cheat sheets to fine-tune what you already know. And what you already know is you've got a player pool of 15 to 20 players, and these are going to be a lot of these guys. I'm not going to say all 15 are going to be on them, but I'm going to say a lot of them will be on those cheat sheets. And then from there, you can piece and match and mix and play around with what you want. And you'll figure it out from there. But this is generally how we're going to use this tool. This is not a great week where things are really, really obvious and really lining up well, but it is a week that we can still get something done and get to looking at some of these lineups. Brady and Antonio Brown stacked. Montgomery, Robinson, McLaurin, Anderson, Hawkinson, Eckler, Giants, not terrible. Brady unstacked. Brady's great to run naked because he spreads the ball around so much. David Montgomery, James Robinson again, Ayuk, McLaurin, Hawkinson, Eckler, Giants, Taysom Hill. You're just going to see a lot of the same type of stuff, and whichever one appeals to you is going to be whichever one appeals to you. But I'll leave you at that. This is just another way to go through and start looking, cross-checking, what am I missing, what am I seeing, what should I look deeper into this week, and what's going to make my final cash lineup and what's not. These names, a good many of these names will end up in your cash lineups. That I promise you. So we'll sit back, we'll wait, watch for the cheat sheets to start populating, and then we'll see how we overlap with these coaches this week. Take care, guys. We'll talk to you soon.